If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying these stories, there's a link below to buy me a cup of coffee. This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HassidicStory.com. HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Shalom Aleichem, my sweetest friends. It's another week, and this week I have 3 stories for you, B'ezrat Hashem. But before I begin, I want to dedicate this podcast episode to the continued success of our soldiers in battle wherever they are, B'ezrat Hashem. The returning of all the hostages healthy and alive, the refuah shlema, the full recovery of everybody who's been injured or who is ill, the comforting of those who lost loved ones, and the continued unity of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and all around the world. This first story comes from the book Ko Asu Chachamenu, a popular book here in Israel in Hebrew. It came out in the 60s. It told stories from sources of our sages of blessed memory, which is Chachamenu or Chazal. I couldn't find the exact source where this is from, but it's from that book. Many, many years ago, in a port town far from Israel, there was a wealthy and influential Jew whose name was Schlommo. And Schlommo had been born into a poor family and grew up in poverty. And from the age of 3, he went to Cheder, like all of the other Jewish children, and learned Torah. But he had a very simple mind, and he couldn't really grasp what was written in the holy books. And even though he learned how to daven, and really not even all of the davening, he realized that he wasn't going to be a Torah scholar. And at some point, there was a teacher that had compassion on him and said, "Listen, Shlomo, you can learn to be a shochet, you can learn to be a butcher. You just have to learn the halachot and go through some training, and you can make a nice living as a butcher." And so he did. When he was 15, he apprenticed as a butcher, learned all of the halachot, learned all of the tricks of the business, and he was a very charismatic guy. He remembered everyone's first name. Whenever customers would come in, he would remember details about them. He'd say, "Chanale, isn't your daughter getting married soon?" She'd say, "Yes, Shlomo, how did you remember?" And he'd throw in an extra piece of meat to help them out for the wedding. Whenever there was a bris or there was somebody who needed help, Shlomo remembered and would help them out. Sometimes it was with food, sometimes it was with money, or whatever they needed. And so people really liked Shlomo. They trusted him, and he became very successful in business. His reputation reached the local duke, who owned all the property in the town. And the duke, seeing that he was so well liked by everyone and trusted, he gave him permission to collect all of the tolls and taxes from all of the ships that entered the city harbor. Now, of course, this was beneficial for Shlomo, but it was also beneficial for the duke, because the duke needed somebody to stand there and actually collect the money, make sure that he got the money, and somebody that wouldn't take bribes or manipulate his power. And so Shlomo became even wealthier. And of course, he didn't stand at the port all day because he was continuing to be a butcher, but he hired trustworthy Jews from the community to collect all of the taxes and tolls in the city harbor, in the port. And he continued in his ways of helping people because he never forgot where he came from, and the wealth never went to his head. It's true, Shlomo could not really learn Torah, but he understood what the Torah was trying to teach us, that we have to help one another. And when wealth is given to a person, it's given in order to help our fellow Jews. And one day, there was a very fancy cargo ship that entered the docks. And Shlomo happened to be working that day, supervising the collection of the taxes. And so Shlomo boarded the boat, and he sees the ship's captain, a heavy-set man with a big beard, looking very muscular. And the captain says to Shlomo, "Come over here. I'm assuming you're a businessman." And Shlomo says, "Yes, I do some business." He said, "Well, I have some precious cargo over here. Maybe it's something that would interest you. It doesn't interfere with your collecting taxes. Don't worry, we'll pay whatever taxes we have to pay. This is a business deal between you and me." So Shlomo says, "Okay, what do you have?" And the captain of the ship says, "I can't tell you what I have, but I can see that you're a Jew, and I can guarantee you're going to like it, and you will not regret your purchase." So Shlomo said, "Listen, I've done a lot of deals here on the port, but I'm not buying anything before I see it. At least tell me what it is and how much you want." The captain said, "What it is, I already told you. And how much?" He said, 10,000 gold pieces. 10,000 gold pieces was a fortune. So Schlommo said to him, what exactly are you selling for 10,000 gold pieces? I'm not just going to give you money. Schlommo thought to himself maybe it was stolen goods or some type of contraband. He was curious, but he wasn't going to just fork over money for nothing. And the captain said, nope, you can't see it. But I can tell you if you don't buy it now, I'll never sell it to you. So Schlommo stuck out his hand to make a deal, and he said, okay, you have my word, 10,000 gold coins. Now show me what you have, and I'll give you the money. But the captain looked Schlommo in the eye, and he said, I won't show it to you until I have the money right here in my open hand. And now because of the games that you're playing, the price has doubled. It's now 20,000 gold coins. So Schlommo said, okay, fine, 20,000 gold coins, but let me see what it is. And the captain said, no, you're playing games with me. I told you, I'm not showing you what it is. But as a Jew, I promise you, you will not regret your purchase. But now it's 40,000 gold coins. And I'm not showing you anything. And if you don't pay me, I'm going to throw it in the sea. And you will never see it again. Now this was absurd. The price kept doubling and doubling and doubling. And each time Schlommo agreed. Something in his heart was telling him that this was important. So he tells the captain, okay, I'll pay 40,000 gold coins. And the captain says, you have 1 hour. No, half an hour. And if I see you coming with the police, I'm going to throw it in the sea, and you will never see it. So Schlommo ran home. He counted out the money. He was very wealthy, but even for him, 40,000 gold coins was a lot of money. Within 20 minutes, he was back to the ship. The captain and his crew counted out the money, and Schlommo said, now bring me what I bought. And the captain said, just wait here. I won't have to bring it to you. It'll walk here on 2 legs. Ha ha ha! And the captain went down the steps into the ship laughing and saying what a great deal he made. And from the bottom of the stairs, Schlommo could hear chains dragging on the ground. Sound got louder and louder until the captain opened the door. And Schlommo saw human beings, people on the floor, chained to the wall, looking like they had no expression on their faces, torn clothes. He'd never seen anything like it. Within a few minutes, 200 Jews, men, women, and children, were standing before Schlommo. The captain and his crew had burned down their village and taken them as captives. The captain gave a sign to his crew. They unlocked the chains, and then he turned to Schlommo and he said, how do you like what you bought? I told you you wouldn't regret it. You should know that if you hadn't bought them, I would have thrown them in the sea. I couldn't find anyone that would buy them, and I'm sick of their stench, and I hate Jews anyhow. You are the last person I was going to try. I've been going around for over a month trying to get rid of them. So Schlommo merited to save 200 Jewish souls. He took them off the ship, and with his servants and his family, he brought them into his home, had his servants feed them. In the meantime, Schlommo ran to the Duke's palace to tell him that the pirates were in the port and to send the police. By the time they got there, the pirates had already escaped into the open sea. Over the next many months, Schlommo took care of the captives. He brought in doctors to take care of them. He listened to their stories. They told him that the captain and the pirates had attacked their village, burned it to the ground, killed many more people than they kidnapped. And for weeks they were stuck there with no light or air and barely anything to eat or drink. After several months, they started recovering slowly. Schlommo was able to help them find work and homes. And there was one girl, very modest, God-fearing girl, intelligent and sweet and kind, that made an impression on him, and he wanted her to marry his oldest son. When he approached her, she was so grateful. She tried to say, why would you want your son to marry somebody like me? I'm no one, and your son is so respectable. But Schlommo liked her even more and put a beautiful necklace around her neck and said, please, I invite you to meet my son. And so the servants dressed her beautifully, and the two of them started meeting. And after several months, it was decided that the couple would get married. Of course, all of the former captives came, and guests came in from near and far, everyone rich and poor, Jews and Gentiles, and even the Duke and his family were given a special place of honor. Everyone wanted to be part of this very special story of this girl who had been taken captive and was marrying Schlommo's son. And Schlommo was going around the crowd, welcoming everyone, laughing, enjoying having the guests in the party. And he noticed there was one young man who looked sad all the time. Unless Schlommo looked at him, then he would fake a smile. Schlommo figured he was thinking about his family or his friends who had been killed by the pirates, or maybe just how difficult it had been to survive this ordeal. He went over to the young man, and his eyes were filled with tears, and he began to cry. And Schlommo waited till he calmed down, and then he said, "What can I do for you? Please, what's wrong?" Schlommo had a feeling that this young man was holding something back. And eventually he said, "In the village where we lived before the pirates came, the bride who's about to marry your son and I agreed that after we saved up enough money, we would get married. But then the pirates came, and that was the end of our plans. But that's what Hashem wanted. It's all in the past now. Both I and the Kala owe our lives to you, and if it weren't for you, we'd all be dead. And your son, I've spoken with him many times. He's a real mensch, and I can see that she likes him. I'm sure that they'll be very happily married. So please, ignore my sadness. There are also tears of happiness for you." So Schlommo decided to test this young man. He said, "I'll give you 10,000 gold coins, and I'll help you find another bride. You're both young, and it's true you want to get married, but with this money, you can start an amazing life for yourself." But the young man said, "If I had a choice, I would not trade her for all the money in the world. But I'm very grateful to you, and I'm happy that she's getting married." So now Schlommo went over to his son, and he told him the whole story, that the couple was planning on getting married, and that he offered him a great deal of money, but he would rather not take it and marry the Kala. And what does his son think? And the father said, "I will accept whatever decision you make, my son." And the son said, "The wedding will go on as planned, but not with me as the Khatan. Rather, the other man will be the Khatan for my Kala." And everyone in the hall was shocked. But Schlommo said, "I once bought 200 souls without seeing them first. And now I learned tonight that some things are more precious than any amount of money. A match made in heaven cannot be purchased. Hashem had decided since before creation that these two souls were meant to be together. It's clear to me that that's what's supposed to happen." And so the wedding took place. And the truth is that Shlomo's son was a little upset because he did really like her. But he was also a God-fearing Jew, and he understood that this was not his beshert. This was not the woman he was meant to marry. And because he was able to let go and allow the other man to marry the woman that he had planned on marrying all along, within a very short amount of time, Shlomo's son found his beshert. And he knew that even though he had loved the other woman very much, this one was the one that was meant to be his wife. And years later, when people would speak about Schlommo, they would say there was a man who once paid twice a fortune without knowing what he was buying. The first time, he saved 200 lives. And the second time, he saved a match made in heaven, and not just one, but two. May Hashem bless us as well, my friends, with wealth, shalom bayit, shidduchim, children, Bezrat Hashem, healthy children, children attached to Torah and mitzvot, and of course Chassidic stories. And to be able to let go when we know that things are not right. Hi, good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Halalai, lai, 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 ma, nini, lai, 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 halalai, lai, lai, nini, lai, lai, lai. I have another story for you. This is a story about the Heilig Baal Shem Tov. Of course, his yahrzeit was on the first day of Shavuot. Now this year I told Shavuot stories. Many years I tell Baal Shem Tov stories. But here's a little Baal Shem Tov story that I came across. Now an interesting thing, I have a new book of Baal Shem Tov stories that I'm going through. It's kind of an academic book. And in it, it lists the date of the Baal Shem Tov's birth as 1700 as opposed to 1698, which is what I've been using. I did a little research and it turns out that there's a dispute which year the Baal Shem Tov was born. So I think I'm going to stick with 1698, since it gives another 2 years of the Baal Shem Tov being in this world. Bezrat Hashem. So as we know, my friends, the Baal Shem Tov lived from 1698 to 1760, and he was the founder of the Chassidic movement, the first real Rebbe. And in the early years, he would travel around, inspiring Jews. And on this particular trip, in the late 1740s, the Baal Shem Tov was traveling with his close student, Reb Wolf Kitzis, who, by the way, is buried next to him in Mezhibuz. Wolf, meaning wolf in English, and Ze'ev in Hebrew. They came to a particular town, and there was a wealthy Jew whose name was Reb Leib, and even though he was a misnagid and opposed the Baal Shem Tov's approach, he was still a wealthy and hospitable person and had guests even if they were Chassidim. But for that Shabbos, he didn't have room for both the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Wolf, so he arranged for them to sleep in the house of a good friend of his, a Reb Shammai, who was also a wealthy Jew. On their way home from shul, Reb Shammai turns to the Baal Shem Tov and he says, I want you to know that I eat the entire Shabbos meal together with my wife and children at the table. I hope you don't mind. But if that's not something that you feel comfortable with, you're welcome to find someplace else to eat. Now, maybe to some listeners that might not sound like an unusual thing, but for somebody who wants to stay separated from women in order for his eyes to not be tempted, sitting at the table with Shammai's wife might make them feel uncomfortable, but not the Baal Shem Tov. And he said, no, that's fine with me. I don't mind sitting at the table with your wife and children. So they started the meal, Shalom Aleichem, Kiddush, Shamotzi, and the servants were bringing out many beautiful dishes and delicacies, and Reb Shammai was enjoying his meal, and Reb Wolf was there as well. And at some point in the middle of the meal, the Baal Shem Tov says to Reb Shammai, I hope you don't mind, but I have a personal custom to get up and dance during the Shabbos meal. Would it be okay if I got up and danced now? And Shammai laughed and he said, is it Simchat Torah? Now is the time for dancing? This is not the time for dancing. But the Baal Shem Tov said, if you don't mind, it's my minhag, it's my custom. And so the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Wolf started dancing together, locking arms, singing a nigun, going around in a circle, raising their hands in the air, spinning around. Shammai and his wife were watching this, and at first they just started laughing. They thought it was the silliest thing that they'd ever seen. But after watching how serious and passionate the two Chassidim were, Shammai stopped laughing. And then he started feeling himself moving in his seat. He started clapping his hands and tapping his feet. And the whole time he's looking at his wife like, I can't help myself. You see, here was a proper wealthy man feeling something in his neshama stirring, something he'd never experienced before. And at some point, Shammai got out of his chair and started dancing with the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Wolf. And at some point, Shammai's wife also got up and danced with her kids. At some point, the dance ended, they sat down to finish the meal, and then the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Wolf went to sleep. Reb Shammai turned to his wife and he said, why were we dancing? What came over us? And who is this man that Reb Leib sent? The next day they had the same thing. The second meal on Shabbos, the Baal Shem Tov gets up, he starts dancing with Reb Wolf, and again, Shammai and his wife and their children could not help themselves but dance as well. And then Shammai realized this was clearly not a silly person, but a very holy person. You see, each dance peeled away another layer of Shammai's resistance to the Baal Shem Tov, awakening parts of his soul that had been sleeping for decades. And by the time they get to the third meal and the Baal Shem Tov started dancing, Shammai and his family were on a whole different spiritual level. They started jumping up and down, dancing with the Baal Shem Tov. At that point, Shammai knew the Baal Shem Tov was indeed a very holy man. When finally Shabbos was over and they made Havdalah, Shammai turns to the Baal Shem Tov and he says, I can see that you're a holy man. Please tell me, what do you need? How can I help you? Do you need money? And the Baal Shem Tov said, no, I don't need any money. But do you mind hosting a Malava Malka meal for me? The meal that we eat after Shabbos, the meal of King David? So he said, of course. And as they were sitting and eating Malava Malka, Reb Shammai says to the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi, can you please give me a blessing? And the Baal Shem Tov said, yes, I can bless you with only one of three things. Long life, wealth, or a family connected to Torah and mitzvot. Which one would you like? And Shammai said, Rebbe, I want all three. And so the Baal Shem Tov blessed him with all three. Shammai lived to a ripe old age of nearly 100 years old, maintaining his wealth, and had many generations of upright and God-fearing Jews. And why did that happen, my sweetest friends? Because Shammai opened his heart to dancing, and that allowed him to be a vessel to receive not just one blessing, but all three blessings. The Baal Shem Tov and Reb Wolf continued on their journey, and they came to the city of Tsargrad, where the great Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polnoi lived at the time. And of course, he's one of the great rabbis and rebbes, and he lived from 1710 to 1784. And he was a fierce opponent of the Baal Shem Tov, a brilliant Torah scholar who looked at the Baal Shem Tov and saw it as a threat to traditional Judaism. The Baal Shem Tov and Reb Zev came into town early in the morning on a carriage that they had hired to take them there. And as was the practice in those days, the local coachmen would come early in the morning and park their coaches at a particular spot, leaving the horses with an attendant who would give them water and care for the tired animals. And at that point, the Jewish coachmen would go to shul and daven. But when the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Zev arrived, they stayed on the carriage. And the coachman who was in front, he said, "Get off of my coach, you old men." But the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Zev stayed exactly where they were. And the Baal Shem Tov began telling stories. And the coachmen, even though they didn't understand Yiddish, could not stop looking at the Baal Shem Tov. Before long, there was a large crowd that had assembled around the carriage that the Baal Shem Tov and Reb Zev were sitting on. Nobody was going to shul. In the meantime, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef was in shul, waiting for a minyan, and no one was there. So he sent his attendant to find out what's going on, and to tell everyone to get to shul, it's time to start. But the attendant, when he arrived, couldn't believe what he saw. The whole Jewish community was standing there, listening to some strange man telling stories. And even the Goyim, the Gentiles, were listening, even though they didn't know Yiddish. And the attendant was so enraptured that he didn't go back to shul to tell the rabbi what was going on. So at some point, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef himself came to see what was going on. He sees all these people standing around the Baal Shem Tov, and the rabbi himself could not help but feel himself drawn to the Holy Rebbe's voice. And as he listened, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef understood that these were not regular stories, but deep, divine secrets. And so the rabbi says to the Baal Shem Tov, "Who are you?" And the Baal Shem Tov stopped telling his stories, and he said, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, exactly the man I was waiting for. I will be very happy to tell you who I am after davening." And with that, everyone turned around and walked to the shul. And after davening, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef and the Baal Shem Tov sat and spoke not just for many hours, but for many days. And after answering all of Rabbi Yaakov Yosef's questions, he became one of the closest Chassidim of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov, to the point where he wrote the book Toldot Yaakov Yosef, which included many of the teachings of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. And after the Baal Shem Tov passed away, there were two potential people that were going to succeed him. One of them was Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polnoi, and the other, Rabbi Dovber of Mezrich. And in the end, we know that it was the Maggid of Mezrich, Rabbi Dovber, that became the successor. But you see, my friends, how the story comes full circle, beginning with a dance that awakened a whole family's soul, and ending with stories that awakened an entire community's heart. The Baal Shem Tov understood that whether it was through the joy of dancing and singing or the power of Chassidic stories, the goal was always the same: to break through the barriers that separate us from Hashem and through each other. And so Shammai, who began by asking, "Is it Simchat Torah today?" ended up dancing with so much passion that he received all three blessings from the Baal Shem Tov. And Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, who started off as an opponent to the Chassidim, became the author of the first Chassidic book and one of the closest followers of the Baal Shem Tov. May we merit, my sweetest friends, to dance when we need to dance, to sing when we need to sing, and to tell or listen to Chassidic stories, and merit to have all of the blessings that the Baal Shem Tov gave to Reb Shammai. I have one more story for you. This is a story that took place right after October 7th in 2023, at the beginning of the war that unfortunately all this time later we're still fighting. There was a young woman in the Or Chaim seminary that contacted Rabbi Chaim Zaid, who was the head of the Mesivta of Yeshivat Nachalat Schlommo in Bnei Barak. And this woman said that she had set aside 6,000 shekels, and she wanted the rabbi to use it to make tzitziot and distribute them to the soldiers going into Gaza. And the rabbi told her, "Save the money, it's too much money." But she was adamant. And in the end, the rabbi took the money, bought 6,000 shekels of tzitziot. And after it was ready, he called her and said to her, "What do you want to do now?" So she said, "Well, me and my brother are going to distribute them in the south." And the rabbi said, "You got to be kidding me. There are still terrorists down there that haven't been caught. I'm happy to help you get the tzitziot, but I'm not going down to an active war zone." And the woman said to the rabbi, "But Rabbi, you have connections. I can't get into the war zone, but you can get us into there." And after a while, the rabbi used his connections and was able to get down south with a car full of tzitziot. At some point, they reach an army blockade where they told him that they can't go any further. And they tried to argue, saying that they had the tzitziot for the soldiers, but the soldiers at the blockade said to them, there's 3 terrorists that had infiltrated. 2 of them were killed, but one of them escaped and we don't know where he is. So we can't allow any civilians into this area. An hour later, the rabbi went over to one of the officers in charge, and he tried to explain what they're trying to do. And he called a brigadier general who showed up, and he sees the rabbi and the tzitziot, and he says, I'll take you there myself. Now this general, and I can tell you, don't become a general in Israel without having fought a lot of wars and killed a lot of terrorists and been through a lot. I guess I should qualify that with a general in a combat unit, because there are generals in administrative positions. So as they're driving, this general turns to the rabbi and he says, after this war is over, there are going to be commissions and investigations trying to figure out what's wrong. He said, but I already know what happened on Simchat Torah that morning of October 7th. Whatever conclusions there will be, I know that the only reason that we're here today is because of the hand of Hashem. So they continued until they reached the base right on the border, and when they got out of the car, they started handing out the tzitziot. And the rabbi sees a soldier standing at a distance and wanted to go over to him to give him a pair of tzitziot, but he motioned that he wasn't interested in the tzitziot. The rabbi figured, okay, I'll throw him the tzitziot anyhow. He rolled up the tzitziot into a ball and threw it as best he could to the soldier, but there was a big gust of wind that blew the tzitziot away from the soldier towards some bushes. And suddenly somebody stands up from behind the bush. It was the terrorist that had escaped. He saw something flying towards him and it scared him, so he jumped up. All the soldiers shot him and sent him to wherever terrorists go. You see, my sweetest friends, this young woman's pure heart wanting to help soldiers, and the reluctant rabbi who didn't want to go down there, and a gust of wind that carried the holy tzitziot just to the right spot at the right moment, was all arranged from Hashem to save Jewish lives. May we all merit to recognize the hand of Hashem in our lives as well, and remember that no act of tzedakah, no matter how small it seems, is ever wasted, because you never know when our pure intentions might become the instrument that saves our fellow Jews. Thank you so much for listening, as always, my sweetest friends. Thank you to all of the listeners and all of the supporters of the podcast, each and every one of you. I hope you have a beautiful week and a beautiful Shabbos. And thank you again for listening and sharing. And until next week, take care of yourselves, my friends, and sei gesund.